think, fair enough, that parties should be concerned that when you get that many navies uh, with that many vessels in the Great Sea, um, heading towards the Persian Gulf, towards the Kush Sea, basically surrounding the Kush Peninsula um, and surrounding Canaan from basically multiple sides. Mm. It's making the markets nervous. And so the quote unquote oil price is dropping. Some would say it should be going the other way. Normally that would be the case. However, again, there is a massive shift on the planet. And although Mamlaka al-Saud is a very large producer of oil, more oil comes from North-Amexem now. More oil and energy products come from North-Amexem now. And again, before the end of our new year, come this spring, there will have been about 14 million EVs acquired across the planet over the last few Earth years. 14 million fewer vessels that run on diesel or gasoline. Demand by default is dropping. Now, it is true, some particular entities in the Far East, they have been padding their numbers. They have been having these EVs bought from their startups. They've been registering those EVs and they've been getting plates on those EVs and basically putting them in the field, rows of them, doing absolutely nothing. Subsidizing by another way, by another method, padding numbers, if you would. Some would call that cheating. I would just call it dishonorable and distasteful. Nonetheless, it's not just the oil price that's dropping. Nat gas is the bigger concern here. Coming into the winter months, if you would, Qatar is talking about possible diversion of their nat gas away from what some call so-called Europe. And that could put pressure there, although they've been stockpiling for a while because they were preparing for the winter. Which is why the nat gas, although it is higher than it was, it's been hovering a certain range over 3 per cubic foot. It could have been worse. It could be worse because as things mount, it can go a lot of different ways. What I do know is this. Again, a net exporter of energy products that includes nat gas from this side of the ocean. Nat gas there's plenty of it. There's plenty of oil. It's just that there's not enough refining capacity. So at the pump, folks are paying higher rates because of the lack of refining capacity. They could actually build the refining capacity if they wanted to, for those that want to use that type of propulsion. If they did, it would basically bring the quote-unquote gas prices down by more than half at the pump. That would be deflationary. More to the point, though, that would mean more pollution. And they're already telling folks any efforts they were going to be doing to lower greenhouse gases in order to save the New Dongola, misnomer so-called quote-unquote Antarctica, where the ice shelves are cracking and falling apart and melting to the point that you have sections of ice the size of what some call provinces breaking off and gradually melting. Is changing the salinity of the ocean, which is going to impact water currents and wind currents. It's going to impact flora and fauna. It's going to impact food source. It's going to impact the temperature on the planet. You're going to see the water level rise by 15 to 17 feet. Now, I left from Port Hannah to come to Agadi Medina because I knew we had to get things right down here. This is our capital city from the beginning, but also I knew the rising sea levels were going to continue in Port Hannah. And where are we now? If you breathe hard, the airport is underwater. Sandy basically took out the lower part of the city. When that hurricane came through, she hasn't been right since. If you breathe hard with a little bit of rain, well, pavement gets washed out. If you breathe hard with a little bit of rain, you can get your kayak out and cruise around where there would be land vessels as a rule. A 17-foot rise, a 15-foot rise, or even a 10-foot rise, at the bare minimum, 10 feet, and basically my whole neighborhood is underwater where I come from. 10 feet, you lose Midtown, as some would say. 17-foot rise is not out of the question. When you take a lot of these things into consideration, operations planning, now it gets skewed more and more by the day by the data. The data is showing if you do not realign what you're doing for energy production and transmission, food growth operations, if you do not realign what you're doing for supply chain operations, now it's going to take decades to get the infrastructure in place correctly on a minor scale to prepare for what's coming and to ride it out and survive it and be able to thrive on the other side requires infrastructure be put in place now. And some would argue the resources. There's plenty of resources when you want to. What they spend their resources on is military hardware. We spend ours on food growth operations because we are a neutral, independent sovereign nation. And if you're not putting your nose in everybody's business, you need to constantly be ramping up how much you're spending for military activity. We don't accept being a bunch of fools here. Defense is one thing. That's not offensive capability. Military is offensive and defensive capability. So we don't do the offensive thing, we do the defensive thing. We'll defend ourselves. We're not aggressors, but we will defend ourselves. It has to be that way. So we don't have to spend massive amounts of funds on hardware for fighting like that. We get to focus on industries, commerce, and trade for things that are civilian in nature, civil in nature. And while there are those that are big on producing things that are whimsical items that folks can survive without acquiring, I prefer we focus on necessities. Yes, then we could also deal with manufacturing of other things, but mainly keeping things simple. In the era of automation, made it to next generation AI, things are going to be very different on this planet over the next 30 Earth years. The Moorish don't talk about it. The Pan-Africans don't talk about it. I look at their budgets, I look at their plans across the planet. CARICOM, AU, others. I look at Mercosur, see what folks are doing and not doing. ECOWAS, SADC, you see where they're at. They're not preparing. And I always say that chance favors the prepared mind. I also know that if folks don't act now, the price that they pay collectively will be astronomical, and it's avoidable.